G'day everyone, and welcome to the Seeds of Synergy podcast. I hope you're doing well, and in this episode, I'll be joined by Amanda Tilson, a longtime family friend from South Africa who now lives in Perth, Western Australia. Amanda has had a lot of years of experience and practice as a counsellor, and this conversation focuses primarily on the importance of seeking counsel for yourself and for others, tips and tricks to help with emotional regulation, emotional imbalance, as well as finding your purpose and your calling to be the person that you were meant to be. Amanda is a loving mother, a great teacher, and an inspirational person. So I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I did recording it. Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm joined today with Amanda Tilson, a long-time family friend from South Africa that has established herself as a counsellor in Australia now and has been spending the last few years working with children. Amanda, is there anything that you'd like to share about yourself before we begin?
Perhaps it's good to start with sort of defining a counsellor as opposed to a psychologist, because I think in specifically Australia, and I know around the world, there's a lot of confusion between the roles of a counsellor versus a psychologist versus even a psychiatrist. So I think it's always nice to have a clarity of what that's about. So I am a clinical registered counsellor with PACFA, which is the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, as well as a member of the Australian Counselling Association and a member of the College of Supervisors for the Australian Counselling Association. So in Australia, counselling is not actually a regulated industry at the moment. There is a lot of work being done to create national standards for it. But at this stage, it's not regulated. So the peak bodies are the ones that are regulating the industry and so are managing ethics and, standards for us. So I think it's really important to know that a counsellor is coming from more of a relational perspective. Often psychologists are more CBT-based, which is behavioural. And so addressing a behaviour, how can we change the beliefs around the behaviour and what the behaviour is, versus a counsellor who's really journeying with from a relational perspective and working through whatever the issue might be. So I do think that and a psychiatrist, just for those that don't know, a psychiatrist is then somebody who can actually prescribe medication. So for different mental health issues, so a psychologist cannot prescribe medication. So I think it's really important to know that the other big thing is that a counsellor cannot diagnose. So they can't give you a diagnosis of an ADHD or autism or depression or any of those things. They can certainly identify symptoms, but they can't actually give a diagnosis, whereas a psychologist can do that. So I think it is important to have that clarity. My qualification is I have a Master of Social Science in psychotherapy and family counselling. So I have my own private practice and have had that for about 6.5 years now. And also work for a university in the Masters of Counselling program. So that's who I am, and I think it's always important there's not a lot of public knowledge around what counselling is, and I think it's really important that we as a society know that, because it's synergistic, but it's not the same as psychiatry or psychology.
That's definitely something that I grapple with as well, the distinctions between psychology, psychiatrists and counselling, but that was a really, really good description of it. In terms of how you came across counselling and how that sort of became your path, what was sort of your transition from that? Because you were heavily involved in the community and raising your children before stepping heavily into the counselling field.
I was brought up in a family that was very community conscious and my undergraduate was actually in commerce, accounting, and so I was living in South Africa and went into the corporate world, corporate management, and I was in that for 13 years in South Africa until we moved to Australia. when I had a 7 and 5-year-old, and I really wanted to spend more time with them while we settled in Australia. My husband was working in a big mining company, so I was wanting to settle the family. And while I was in that sort of transitional period, I tried to go back into corporate, and it just didn't sit with me. There was something more to it. In South Africa, being in corporate, human resources was very different to human resources here in Australia, where in South Africa, we were very much involved with the people. And, I led funeral services, and I sat by people's bedsides, and we really, there was a lot more grandfathering than what happens here, because the state takes care of so much more here. So coming here and going into corporate was very different in Australia, and I just thought, this isn't where I need to be. And I saw a brochure advertising a counselling course, and I did a bit of research, and I realised that actually I should rather go back to university. And so that's what I did. I went back and I studied my master's, and have not looked back. It's been an amazing journey for me, yeah, and really lovely and flexible, because it's been good for my family as well. So yeah,
I suppose a combination of that community focus, but also your intrigue and fascination with particularly the great philosophers and psychologists like Freud, and you spent some time in Vienna and exploring that. Were they quite influential as well, the books you read, in terms of?
To be honest, I didn't know what I was getting into when I signed up for counselling. I had no idea. I'm a concrete thinker, and I kind of expected everything to be very concrete, and it really wasn't. And getting to understand human nature and where this all comes from was really eye-opening for me. And just being able to start exploring philosophy, exploring what drives needs, what drives behaviors, what drives, what shapes nature versus nurture, all of those kind of things. And so I entered a world which was really, really interesting. And yes, sort of going into Freud's world, going into, one of my favorites is Edith Eger, who, has written The Choice and the Gift, which are both remarkable books around, she's a Holocaust survivor, she's an existential psychotherapist, and she's just incredibly insightful and wise, and just the fact that we have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to humanity, to actually be interested in others and care about them as humans. So I think that, if that answers the question.
It does. I've definitely found that the more I'm reading about psychology, philosophy, all these different pathways that delve into human nature and how we explore ourselves and express ourselves, it's really interesting. But it can kind of feel sometimes you get so enveloped and lost in the theory that the practical approaches for how to integrate that into betterment of individuals in the community can get a bit lost. But coming back to how you're talking about your concrete nature, I believe you've established a framework that quite holistically aligns with your particular set of values, and how you, through your counselling, aim to bring out the best individual or work with them to overcome some of the challenges that they're facing.
I hope so.
Speak to that in a sense?
I think, it's interesting, because it's... If I come back to today's society, and so much emphasis is on me and I, and there's not a lot of outward looking. We're taught to be kind. We're taught to be good humans. We're taught to be tolerant. These are all words that are buzzing around. But what does that really mean? And who's saying be kind to yourself? Who's saying, what that looks like? So I actually would love to see counselling taught in high schools as a subject for everyone, a compulsory subject.
Yep.
Because I think that we all of humanity has a responsibility to counsel our neighbour, and to actually know the core conditions of empathy, unconditional positive regard, compassion, curiosity, and let me think of the last one, it'll come back to me, congruence. And I think that if we are taught as humans to have those 6 conditions, our relationships would be so much better. We would be able to have better work relationships, better partner relationships, better parental and child relationships, because we would have a different way of being. So if you want to come back to those things, so the core conditions were actually named by Carl Rogers. So he was one of the founders of the humanistic approach. So I'll give you a little bit of context there. So psychotherapy means talking therapy. Okay, so it can cover any of the therapies. There are 3 schools under that. There's psychoanalytical psychotherapy, which was really Freud's, very much looking at id, ego, superego, looking at, so these might be terms that are beyond the scope of, I'm not going to go into all of that, but there's lots of things that he is really, what has happened in our past that is influencing our behaviours in the present and restricting us from moving forward into the future. So Freud is very much about, defences, projection, all of those kind of things. So that's the one school. This second school is the humanistic approach, which is where sort of your existential psychotherapists fall, your Gestalt, all those kind of different schools of thought fall under humanistic, which is very relational. And this is where Carl Rogers sits. Your third would be your behavioural therapies, which is really a lot of psychology around CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, or any of that, DBT, any of those kind of things. So you've got the 3 schools. Under Carl Rogers' core conditions, that's where you're looking at those 6. And I think that those are so essential for all of us to have. Compassion, we know what compassion is. Empathy, trying to walk in somebody else's shoes, trying to understand or mentalize what's actually happening for you when a situation is happening, trying to move out of this is my experience, what is your experience?
How do you find, from your experience, the best way for individuals to practice empathy? Because I know personally I've got my own worldviews and my own ways of perceiving experiences, and if I'm interacting with someone that's had a vastly different upbringing, vastly different parental conditions or domestication that's from their perspective, it can be quite a barrier sometimes to empathise with them and their experiences.
I think the most important 2 things. 1, pause. Stop. Think. Because I think we're really quick to put in our own thoughts or experience or whatever.
Judgments or assumptions.
Unconscious bias, all of that speaks into it. So we need to pause and have a look at what's happening for me in this moment. How am I responding? There might be a bodily response. I've been brought up in a certain way and there's definite bias, or I was attacked by a dog, and so my thinking around dogs is very different to that person's thinking around dogs. Pause. Have that moment where you actually go, what's happening for me right now? What belongs to me and what belongs to the other person? And then put yourself in their shoes. The second part of that is being curious. And ask the questions. Be curious. What's going on for you right now? Sure, that looks like quite a big feeling that's happening for you. Have you felt that before? Where does this come from? Now, these are things we should teach in school, right? Because this comes back to being a good human. It's not rocket science. It's about relationship. The only 2 times in our life when we are completely alone is when we're born and when we die. The rest of the time, we're in relationship. Even when we're on our own on the top of the Himalaya mountains, we still have a mother and a father that we already have relationship. We already have stuff going on with. So everything is about relationship in our life. So we need to be good humans. How can we have relationship? So I think those are the 2, to answer your question, the pause and the curiosity are the 2 main things that I would say.
So we got to compassion, empathy, and then...
And curiosity is one of those as well. So 3, unconditional positive regard.
Unconditional positive regard.
So when somebody walks in or is in front of you, no judgment, nothing. Okay, how can we actually look beyond what we're seeing to the person behind the behaviour? Because the behaviour is something that they have learnt to protect themselves from an unsafe situation, and they've developed these behaviours their whole life. So what's the need being met by the behaviour? It's usually protection, it's usually defence. So how can we see beyond the behaviour? So coming back to curiosity, if you can be curious about the behaviour, you'll get to what's behind the behaviour, what's driving the behaviour, and then you can have that unconditional positive regard. Carl Rogers, I believe it was Carl Rogers, talks about having a South African apartheid soldier coming into his room for counselling and feeling these immense feelings of disgust, hatred. And he really had to put himself to one side to come to a point where he could help this guy come to the realization of his own actions and work through the guilt that this guy actually felt and the shame for his own actions, to get to a point where he was able to walk alongside this guy out of his own dark journey.
Wow.
So that's what we need to be able to do. Whoever comes in, and in counselling that you do have limits. You know, perhaps you've been as a counsellor, you've been in a domestic violence relationship, and now some guy comes in and he's a perpetrator. How are you going to respond to that? Maybe you actually have some limits on your own and you say, you know what, I'm afraid I'm not the best person for you. I'm going to refer you to such and such. We still have to have unconditional positive regard and respect for that person because they're a product of something else. But we can also put our own protections in place and go, I need to protect myself in this because I don't feel safe and I'm not going to be the best person for him. So, or her. Could be either. So unconditional positive regard, really important. Listening, obviously. Congruence is a really interesting one because congruence speaks into what we should all be, which is authenticity. Yeah. So congruence is about being congruent. What's happening inside is congruent with what's happening outside. So often people say, oh, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and people go, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's okay to do that. Obviously, being sensitive to what's happening around you and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, but always be congruent. Like, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Say what you mean and mean what you say. That's it. So I think that's a really important. So those are your 6. If we can teach these in schools and we can really get people to understand at that level to treat one another with this, we're going to change our whole society.
Well, I suppose that's actually something I wanted to unpack a bit further with the congruence. I definitely know for myself have fallen prey previously and time again have to remind myself not to. Societal expectations, societal beliefs, and the ways that human beings should live an ordinary life, particularly in the developed world, is so ingrained in our education system and even parental doctrine, religious doctrine. It's quite overwhelming.
Cultural
and
expectation.
Exactly. Yep. How would you recommend, from your experience, people can be more congruent and authentic to themselves in and amongst all of this societal expectation?
Why are we not congruent? We're not congruent because of fear of judgment, of fear of being ostracized, because we have an experience of bullying or racism or any of those things. So it is very hard to be congruent. It really is. In this very politically correct environment, how am I able to speak my truth and my beliefs without offending somebody else? It's very, very hard. But I think that's why I said, in terms of congruence, be sensitive to the environment. Yep. So if you can't be congruent, rather don't say anything, actually, you know. But don't be incongruent. Don't be ingenuine.
Don't be ingenuine. And I think that's so true. Being authentic to yourself, speaking your truth, again, being sensitive of the surroundings and the environment that you're in. Someone said something really interesting to me, which is, no matter what you say or do, it's not going to appeal to everyone. There's always going to be some people that denounce or aren't too stoked with what you've said or done. So why then wouldn't you just be authentic to yourself and be your true self? Regardless, there'll still be backlash from people that don't agree with what you say and how you go about your life. However, at least then you are being authentic to yourself and not worrying about filling this societal expectation that might not align with who you are and what you're wanting to do.
I think it's also about, it comes back to being respectful of others and having that unconditional positive regard. So just because you are being you, it doesn't mean they have to be you as well. So you are needing to actually take that step back again and go, okay, my truth is maybe not their truth. How am I going to work with that? How am I going to make that something that means we can still have a relationship without it being a conflict? And I think that that's really, really important to be able to, if we all had the capacity to do this, we would have a wonderful world, because we could actually then have these conversations without fear of rejection, ostracism or whatever, those kind of things.
You said just then the capacity to exemplify these humanistic traits of congruence, empathy, compassion, curiosity. What do you think for most people is the hindrance to that capacity?
A lack of ability to self-reflect and be self-aware.
Yeah.
I think self-awareness is hugely lacking in our environment. And I think a lot of the work that I do with kids is around recognizing what's happening for you right now. And I start with the body, somatic stuff. So where are you feeling that? So when that person said that to you, when that child, teen, whatever, said that to you, where were you feeling it? Did you feel it in your tummy? Did you feel it in your hands? With the kids, I get them to colour in where they actually feel it in their body. And then I say, so I've got one example. It was a little girl, she was about year 7. And I noticed that whenever she came in, she was jiggling her knee up and down. And a lot of kids do that, but she was, but it would come and then it would go, and depending on where our conversation rolled, that would be. And I actually pointed it out to her, and I said, I'm really curious that when our conversation gets a little bit tricky, I see your knee starts jiggling. Have you noticed that? And she said, oh, that's just something that happens. And I said to her, well, it's actually your body telling you something. I said, because what I've noticed is it's in particular rhythms in our conversation that this is coming up. And I'm wondering if your body is actually giving you a clue so that can tell your mind it should be thinking about something differently. So she went away, and I saw her 2 weeks later, and she came back and she says, I can't believe it. You were quite right. She says she would notice her knee jiggling, and she would actually look around to see if there was somebody who upset her, somebody that made her feel unsafe, whatever. And every single time, her knee was telling her that there was some unsafe factor in the area. Wow. And so she was able to actually work with that with her mind and actually calm herself down and go, it's okay, I'm safe right now. I have my friend next to me, or move to a safe space, or whatever it was. And I think it's really important that we, from a young age, understand to listen to our bodies and what that means. When a child tells you before school in the morning, I've got a sore tummy, that's their anxiety speaking. It's got nothing to do with them having a sore tummy. No. It's actually, their tummy is sore, but that is a sign of, there's a beautiful, a couple of examples where there's a book I read, I'm going to forget the name now, but anyway, it was, it's about body things happening without us even being aware of it. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name now, but anyway, right. It's, the example is when we're sad, water comes out of our eyes. Do we tell water to come out of our eyes? No, it just happens. When we're embarrassed, our cheeks go red. Do we tell our cheeks to go red? No. So our body is showing us our emotions. We need to know, we need to read all the signs. We talk about crying, we talk about red cheeks, but we don't talk about sweaty palms or sore tummies or clenched fists or jiggling knees. Yeah. So I think there's a lot about, so first step in self-awareness, I believe, is actually noticing what your body's telling you, tapping into that and going, what's happening for me right now in this conversation? And then moving into, okay, what do I need to do to feel safe right now? Because a lot of it is around safety. A lot of it is around bringing up past. You might not be unsafe, but you remind me of somebody who was.
Time or a place where I wasn't feeling too safe.
Yeah. Yep, a relationship that I had where I wasn't safe, which is why we often in couples work find that, because, for example, a second marriage is bringing with it all the baggage of the first marriage.
Yep.
So it might be a completely different person, and yet one thing will trigger the history. And so your defenses will all come up, and the other person won't know what the heck is going on. And so we really need to, and the psychosomatic stuff that's happening in our bodies, we need to listen to it and know. And there's some brilliant work out there. We know about the trauma responses, trauma in our body. Our body holds the trauma, and it comes out in different ways. And we need to really be aware of that. So self-awareness leads to being able to be congruent and being able to work with other people. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And in terms of your relationships and how you've noticed a difference since embarking on the practice and embodiment of a lot of these really altruistic values that we should all hold dear, how have you noticed a transition in how you interact with your partner, your children, or even your working relationship? Improve self-awareness.
Still human.
Yeah.
I think none of us, this is a lifelong journey. And I think it's a great lifelong journey to strive towards. But I think it's definitely improved relationships around me. It's hard in the beginning because when everybody hasn't got the same level of awareness or the understanding of the necessity for awareness, then it becomes really quite hard. Especially where my family is very technically minded and not very philosophical, or so the onion layer is not always there, and so I struggle sometimes with that. And I'm going, come on, guys, you can think about this, and so I think it can be frustrating, and I think we need to really be careful of becoming arrogant in that space.
Yes.
That I have this self-awareness and you don't. And we need to just be able to stop that right there and go, everybody's on their own journey. But it comes back to what we're teaching our kids. Why are we so focused on, NAPLAN and these kind of things? We should be focused on helping them develop as little human beings to be resilient, so that by the time, even putting this into primary school kids, so that by the time they reach high school, these things are nutted out. Right. They can become their best people. I mean, we look at developmental stages, we look at Erickson, and we know that, upper primary, you're looking at that sort of inferiority versus accomplishment, what's the word for it? Industry versus inferiority. Right. So at that point, if they are feeling senses of failure and they don't navigate that stage well, they're moving into the role confusion versus identity stage without feeling accomplished. And so identity suddenly becomes, so everything has an impact on the next developmental stage if they haven't navigated that one first. So if we can help them not feel failures, if we can not have these prize givings where kids are being high and mighty and others are feeling like absolute failures, what are we doing to our kids? Let's give them everything we can to make them feel like successful human beings for whatever they achieve. So that's a bit of a passion story of mine, yeah.
And I have found the nature, particularly in this day and age, to compare either your own journey, your own financial successes, your own relationships with others is actually such a root cause of sadness and depression and feeling less than, when in actuality, sort of comparing with other people and where they are in their respective journeys and their own path to reflect inwards and realize more so how much I've improved since starting this journey and how can I be the best version of myself. It might not look like Simon or Greg or Amanda, but
Yeah, tracking your own path I think is really good and important. Setting goals and being able to reflect on them and go, okay, I might have fallen short on that, that's okay. Let's just, is that goal not actually for me? What do I need to do moving forward? I think another important aspect of this is feedback and being open to feedback.
Yep.
And not taking it as judgment or whatever, but actually going, there might be some truth in that. What do I need to do to actually, work with that? It might be my own defences, which developed when I was 4 years old, which are coming up, and somebody's saying to me, oh, you're a bit reactive on that. And I'm going, oh, was I? What could that be about? What do I need to do to address it? Often it's simply saying, thanks so much, Defence, for protecting me when I needed you, but I actually don't need you anymore, and letting it go. So that's really helpful to be able to do that and recognise it. So, yeah. But it's a lot of work and a lot of awareness that we need to have, and a lot of compassion for self. Gabor Mate, brilliant man, talks about compassionate inquiry. Right. And compassionate inquiry is all about looking inward, is being compassionate to self, because we are our own harshest critics. And actually, that's one of the things that we try and do in counselling, is actually to model compassionate inquiry. So we're gently fleshing out something, but the language that we're using, we are hoping is modelling for the person to actually be asking themselves in that same tone, and to be compassionate with themselves and asking those questions like, where did that reaction come from? What could that have been? When did I last feel that? I felt it then. But is it helpful now? No. And sort of being able to do that in a very compassionate way, and understand that, yes, that bully at school was not very nice, but I'm okay now and I'm safe. So, yeah.
And you mentioned integrating counselling and these sort of practices into the education system is a major goal of that. Do you have any idea of how you were wanting to do that, or stepping stones to that?
At this stage, I'm in Western Australia, and we don't have counsellors in our primary schools. We have chaplains who are beautiful people, who are not qualified counsellors. They're more like pastoral caregivers. Yep. And we have psychologists who come in and do assessments, but they don't actually work with the kids. They might come in weekly or fortnightly, depending on the size of the school, and they'll do observation and assessment and recommendation, but they won't actually work with the children. And my biggest advocacy at the moment is around getting counsellors into schools, because I really feel like we should be proactive instead of reactive. Yep. So a lot of our children are in very dysfunctional families with drugs, alcohol, you name it, domestic violence. A lot of our children are very vulnerable. On top of that, of course, we've got a whole, neurodiversity. We've got lots of kids with ADHD masking like crazy at school, coming home and just really not coping because it's just too much. We've got children with autism. We've got lots and lots of things going on. We've also got all the stuff in the news that the kids are so much more access to now with social media and everything. So I really feel there needs to be intervention in primary schools, and we don't have it. We do not have mental health support in primary schools, and that is not good. That's really not good. So that is something that I advocate for. What I'm really pleased to tell you is that the university that I work for is we now have I work in the student placement program, and we've now put students in 13 primary schools in WA.
As a part of their placement to help develop their own skills, but also to
So they have a 16-week placement, and the schools are just asking for the next, because they are seeing such a difference in just having that additional support for children in need.
Have you, in terms of the feedback the schools have provided, what sort of impacts is the counselling on ground having for the students and the student body?
In terms of feedback from the schools?
From the school, or just any feedback you've heard about?
Feedback's just been brilliant, from the schools, from principals, from teachers, from parents, and from the kids themselves. Just having somebody who will listen to them. Our teachers are overworked. Absolutely, they do not have time for a kid. When the children come into the classroom, the teacher needs them to be ready to learn. She has 30 children sitting in front of her, and she has not got time or capacity to go and find out what's happening with little Johnny at home this morning, that he's acting in the way that he's acting. So we need to have support for our teachers and obviously support for our children. So it's making a massive difference. So hopefully with the data that we're collecting from this, we will actually be able to advocate more on a state level and actually get these counsellors then employed in the schools. Of course, there's no funding for it. So this is the biggest hurdle, is to actually get funding, either state or federal, but we need funding to get these guys into schools.
And I suppose having quantitative data from survey results and the likes, as opposed to just the qualitative, will hopefully be a much bigger sort of
Absolutely. And the good thing, obviously, at this moment, because placement students are free, so it's not costing the schools anything. So it's really great data to collect, and then to be able to actually feed back into the powers that be to actually get this happening, because we need it so badly. And we've got some great counsellors out there that are coming through. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, the system is not regulated at the moment from a government perspective, so we've got a lot of fly-by-night, really not great things happening with counsellors calling themselves counsellors after a 2-week training program, which is just not okay. But I think the minute this is all, properly regulated, we'll have a much stronger stance, like in America, like in England. We're way behind the ball on these guys. So, yeah.
Wow. And in terms of, not to say once the damage is done, but after the high school transition and they might have gone through these developmental phases and felt as if they're lagging behind, what would be your recommendation in terms of being confident enough to seek help?
I really, really, really encourage anyone to, if you're looking for a counsellor and looking for somebody to do life with and journey with, who doesn't carry baggage, it's not your parent, not a friend who's giving the best advice they can but actually not qualified, get onto one of the either PACFA or ACA and find yourself a good counsellor. And they listed there what their qualifications are, what their backgrounds are. There are different levels on ACA. Any clinical registered counsellor is good on PACFA. They've got very high standard, a higher bar. So that's really good. And I would really encourage you, because this is a tool for life, right? This isn't just, I have just a beautiful little story. I had the last session of last term that I had was with a young girl that I started working with when she was in year 1.
How old would that have been?
She would have been
9.
5 at the time,
Wow.
5 or 6. Yep. She has, she's diagnosed level 2 autism, and she also has ADHD, so often comorbid. You've got those kind of things going. She really struggled all the way through primary school. But I've been the one consistent. And the last session of last term, the end of 2024, was her last day of primary school, and she had a session with me that afternoon. And we had a celebration because of the journey she's come through, all that she's accomplished. She's really achieved so much. It's been such a struggle for her. But the consistency of having a counsellor, the same person to go to every 2 weeks. Teachers change, EAs come and go, those are educational assistants, come and go. Even other support network, the government kind of support networks come and go. But she and I have built this brilliant relationship all the way through. And I will continue seeing her. Her mother just texted me yesterday, please can I start seeing her? She's starting high school now, this week.
Wow.
And please will I continue. So the transitions that these kids are going through are, constant. Life-changing stuff happening. Dad's then suddenly doing FIFO, then dad's back, then mum's doing this and mum's back, and then there's another sibling, and then sibling gets a diagnosis, or there's change happening for these kids all the time. So if there's a constant just to help them process what's happening all the way through, makes such a difference in their little lives. Just this sense of self and belief in self. It's just incredible. I love it so much. Yeah.
And I suppose finding the right pairing for the individual. You mentioned before how some counsellors might have past traumas that list emotions, and then even if they are trying to approach it with the best positive intention, And I've actually had a few friends that have sought counsel once or twice, but they didn't quite resonate with the person that was there, and so they just gave up on the endeavour altogether.
Don't give up. That's all I say. Don't give up. Keep seeking.
Keep seeking until you find the person.
Until you find the one that connects, and then stick with them, because they're like gold. Really, you will never, ever, ever regret it. I've got one lovely client who I've also seen for a few years, and my husband sees him coming up the driveway, and he says to me, you know, one day this kid, he's going to arrive on his Harley Davidson with his tats and his leathers and all, and he's going to come in and he's going to be all big and he's going to say, where's my cup of tea? Because this kid went through a big trauma a while back, and the way to actually ground him when he came into me, I said, would you like a cup of tea? He's actually the only person in my entire practice that I make a cup of tea for, but he gets his cup of tea. It's always ready waiting for him. And so that's the kind of, you know, I don't know, it's just something very special that you build these relationships, and they don't have it. A lot of these kids don't have that relationship in the world. They don't have it. So seek the person, find somebody who's gold for you and journey with them. Let them be your person. It's not counselling shouldn't be 3 weeks and I'm done or whatever.
Yeah.
See them as a life partner.
A lifelong journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships. Talk about your relationships in there. Talk about everything. Bring it in. Yeah.
And in terms of the relationships you fostered with even your own sons, how's your approach to parenting sort of not changed, but adapted and evolved over time?
I'm just really sorry I hadn't studied this when my kids were little. I think my first 5 years with each of my boys would have been very different to what they were. I was very focused on working. I was very focused on being an amazing mother as opposed to being present, which is actually all I needed to be, because those first 5 years are critical. Attachment years define all your relationships going forward.
Really?
Yeah. Whether you have strong attachments or not, insecure, whether your parents are available for you or not, that's what you're going to be then putting onto all your future partners. And it's really significant. Mm-hmm.
I suppose that's where most of your neurological and software development as a human being is the most nourished and fostered, is those...
You're relational. Can I rely on this person or not?
Yeah.
And when I can't rely on you, and you're the one person that's supposed to love me and take care of me, then how the hell can I trust anybody else in this life?
Wow.
Yeah, significant and deep, really, really deep. Yeah. Wow. And often, even working with children as a counsellor, you've got to be really careful. There's something called transference. You can go and look this up, but you've actually got to be really careful, because you do take on almost a soul parenting for these kids.
Yep.
I am very passionate about these children, but I have to remember that I'm not their parent. I am simply a counsellor. And so I have a boundary, and I need to keep those boundaries really clear, professionally, ethically, and that's what makes me and others good counsellors, is to know what's happening for me right now. The minute I start feeling that motherly instinct, I actually need to be checking in on myself, going, hold on a sec. No, this isn't okay. You need to pull back or deal with it.
I suppose there's actually got to be that line in the sand somewhere, because otherwise the emotional attachment to these children and these connections that you've had, it could almost be overwhelming for you with
100%.
all of the things that they're going through. You start to wear that in your...
100%. I found it, I was in a school for 4.5 years, and I found that particularly difficult, because I didn't actually work with the parents as well. So I wasn't doing a lot of systems, what we call systems theory, which is really family therapy, family theory. I was working with the child, sending them back into the same context. So the issues weren't changing, the behaviours weren't changing at home, nothing. And it made me really, really sad, really angry. I had a lot to work with that, because being in private practice, the parent is actually bringing the child in and going, help, we've got a problem. Usually they'll come in with a behavioural problem.
Yep.
And I have a session with the parent. And by the end of the session with the parent, I know exactly what's going on, and the problem is not usually the child. 99.9% the problem is not the child. It's a systemic problem. And so the brilliant thing is that the parents that brought their children in are really open to hearing and working on the systemic issues.
And that actually circles back really beautifully to that feedback you're talking about, being open-minded and willing
100%.
to accept feedback, because if it's coming from this place of care and love and consideration and nurture, it's with the best intentions that.
And the parents are really, you become part of the team, the parenting team. You know, just incredible. I just got a text the other day from a mum who was just saying, I won't find it now, but it's just thank you so much for the parents got divorced a few years ago. And I've been working with the daughter ever since. And she says she just doesn't believe that the child would have the strength that she has if she hadn't had this ongoing relationship and ability to, because when children are in a home that is separated, there's a sense of betrayal. So you can't talk to mum about dad. You can't talk to dad about mum because you don't want to betray either. You're caught in the middle, apart from your own feeling perhaps of guilt or whatever. Maybe you caused this, was it whatever.
And is that even in the case for amicable split-ups in terms of the parents both
100%.
being on really good terms?
100%.
Okay.
In fact, this particular one was very amicable, and but she has not been able to. So if something happens at dad's house, or she might have a fight with dad, or something happens, she can't talk to mum about it because she doesn't want to betray dad. So you're now the person in the middle who's actually facilitating a safe place for them to process what's happening. And you need to keep balance. I mean, you can't say, oh, that's terrible. No. You really need to go, okay, what does that look like for you? How are you going to work with that? And just help them to work it through themselves.
And I suppose, just having that unbiased third party to confide in and
100%.
seek counsel is invaluable, especially if you're feeling like you're taking on all of these different parenting techniques and experiences.
And for single parents, they're struggling because they don't want to put their own hurts, betrayal, sense of betrayal, whatever it is, onto the children. And so they're just not sure how to work with this. What can I say? What can't I say? What should I? So you're helping them navigate as well what this looks like, especially in the early stages of separation. So, and helping parents set up that kind of plan around how's this going to work? What does it look like? How are we going to help our children? Children are amazingly resilient, right? They are incredibly resilient. So parents that staying together because of the children it's not a reason. Your children will be okay if you help them process it properly. So it's interesting. Lots of different areas. And
it is amazing. People that have potentially had a really tumultuous upbringing, either rife with abuse or drugs or all other sorts of things, still find the strength and resilience to be authentic to themselves, still be considerate and compassionate, and approach life with curiosity, which is
and they often say it just takes one person to show kindness to actually change that trajectory. Instead of going on that path of self-destruction and all the rest of it, to actually have one person notice, one person to say, are you okay? To see you beyond whatever you're presenting on the outside.
And would you posit actually that sometimes a lot of that crying for help that kids, adults, teenagers might outwardly extend is in search of that one person to potentially say, hey, everything's all right, and give them that kindness to not continue that self-destructive?
I would like to say and posit, this is a personal theory, that the ultimate search is for permission to love oneself. So as opposed to searching for finding the kind person,
that external
finding
or
self-kindness. So, but the one person can model and can show them that they're worthy of being loved. And so if we can turn that internal dialogue around, the inner child, which is still criticizing and judging and all the rest of it, if we can turn that inner child's voice into something positive, you've got to win. That's what we want. That's what we want.
That's actually a really, really good way of looking at it. And in terms of your capacity to help, I know you've got so many things on your plate in terms of community involvement. You've just got appointed as a
Justice of the peace.
Justice of the peace.
I know, that was just a little bit of a sideways thing.
A side hustle.
Just do something for the community, give something back,
What capacity do you feel you are most giving back, or most sharing this message of love and self-love? Is it by being an example yourself? Is it through the work you do with the university, your practice with children?
I like to think, I would like primarily to think that my impact is on the children that I work with.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm only one person, and I can only work, and I only have the capacity to work with so much. So I feel, and that is why I'm doing the university work that I'm doing. The reason I'm doing that is so that I can equip others to have the same passion, to have the same ethics, have the same professionalism, to be able to actually act as leaders in the space, in our industry. So my passion is around equipping others, and that's why I do the university work, so that I know that there is excellence coming out of our university, and that, that's really important for me, that they have a heart, the right heart for what they're doing.
What I find so amazing about the work that you do is the fact that, like you said, it's the ethics, the values, the morals, as well as the process that you're teaching. Everyone's going to have their own background and their own approach to life, their own perspective and their own insight to offer as a counsellor. So in terms of equipping the next generation, the diversity of people that they'll then be able to align with and help is...
I think what's really good, and I think that what actually makes me so enthusiastic to get this into schools, is the fact that the students that we have coming through to do the masters are all mature age students.
Yeah.
We have CEOs, we have teachers, we have physiotherapists, we have accountants, we have you name it. We have got from all scopes of life. Obviously, a lot have come from sort of other mental health areas, sort of more compassionate spaces, but all of these people have one thing in common. They've realised there's more to it than just being a CEO. How can I actually have better relationship with my people? How can I support them? A physiotherapist wanting to offer the holistic, not just wanting to be a good physio, but actually going, but while that guy's lying there, he's telling me all this stuff and I don't know what to say or how to help him. I want to know more. So these people, so counselling is not necessarily, you don't need to be a counsellor and that's your profession.
Yeah.
It is synergistic to anything, whether you're in corporate, whether you're in, a hair salon. It doesn't actually matter. Counselling is a skill that everybody should actually have. I think that's mine.
So there are courses actually readily available for people that were wanting to learn more, that don't necessarily have to embark on either a bachelor's or master's degree in counselling.
There are courses. I'd be really careful because there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
So you want to do your research on it. And under the new national standards, ultimately, hopefully at some point we'll be getting Medicare. There's going to be limits on the you're going to have certain qualifications in order to get that. So if you, for example, the master's program that I am involved in, the first 3 units you can actually check out after the first 3 units with a grad cert.
Okay.
Or you can go on and do your full master's. So you can just get that, and some people do that. Most people get to that point and go, no, wait, I want to keep going. This is so interesting, and this is humanity. Come on, let's learn about it. But there are people who check out with that, yes. So.
Well, I suppose, the only angle I'm coming from would be sort of that friend relationship that you're talking about, where friends do want to offer the best advice to their friends that might be going through a hard time, not necessarily from a lens of authority, but more so just to have
from a professional context. You want to, so we're talking about couch counsellors.
Couch counsellors.
We need qualified couch counsellors.
Qualified and equipped couch counsellors.
And that's would happen in schools. That's why I come back to we should all have it.
Yeah.
Because I think it would help people just do relationship better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any other insight or lived experience that you thought might be beneficial for
Patrick, I could carry on all day. I think another little thing that I just thought of, and maybe this is maybe about an attitude towards the people that we work with, and it was actually Melania Gates who said it. So Melania and Bill Gates do, well, they're obviously not together now, but they did a lot of work in sort of African countries and housing developments and all of the rest of it. But I heard a really good podcast between her and Brene Brown. And Melinda Gates said, did I say Melania Gates? That was Melania Trump. No, it's Melinda. Melinda Gates. And she said that she always goes into a community thinking these people's glasses are not half empty, they're half full. So what have they already got? They've already overcome every single day up till this point. How have they done that? What resilience must they have had and survival instincts to have got to today? Let's take that and grow that, as opposed to going in with, oh, they haven't got anything, we need to give them. How can we top up what they've already got? Yeah. And I love that, and I bring it into my counselling room a lot in terms of my own thought process. What have you already got? How can we boost that? How can we improve that? Because you have survived all the traumas you've been through, abuse, whatever it is, you have survived every single day until now. How have you done that? Because your glass is already half full. Yeah. How can I top it up for you?
I think that ties in so well as well with the unconditional love, because you're recognizing the internal resilience and strength and characteristics that have shaped who they are and how they've gotten to where they are, and working with that instead of saying, you're facing all these problems, here's all this advice and all this insight that might not necessarily be in tune with who you are. So also the empathy side of that is
100%, yeah.
What makes them them and how they've ended up where they are.
And even by just coming in and saying, recognizing that, how much are you empowering them? You're not coming in and saying you've got nothing.
Yeah.
You're actually coming in going, wow, you're amazing, you're awesome. You've achieved all of this with nothing. How did you do that? How are you already building up that person? And that's what we want to do. We want to build up.
And empower.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in terms of the people that you've worked with in the university setting that have come from all these different career pathways and have...
The students you're talking about?
The students, yes, and have found the synergy and sort of underlying relational connection that all of this work aligns with. How have their different approaches and particularly perspectives changed over time?
I think it's amazing because I've worked all the way through the master's program in different units. So I have spent quite a bit of time in the foundational units, those first three, and few through the middle, and then I've been in the placement team for a while now. But seeing the level of self-awareness, growth, development from those foundational units to that end stage, so it's a 2-year program, is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And people catching themselves and just having that, peeling back those onion layers, being able to actually go, oh, what happened for you in that session? I felt happy. No, talk deeper, go deeper. What did you really feel? Well, actually, I noticed myself, That's it. That's what we want. So I think the biggest development is around capacity for reflection and self-awareness. That's really, really important, because as a counsellor, you need to know what's going to trigger you. I was talking earlier about counter-transference, stuff like that. What's going to happen for me when somebody comes in? So I want to know that I'm okay, and that's the biggest development, I think. And so seeing that growth, and people don't expect it. They're coming in to learn a subject, and actually they're learning themselves, and they are the subject, and that's brilliant. Yeah.
That is a really, really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose, I think, just from my own experience, but a lot of the books I've read on human nature is you set these goals and these milestones, but if you don't practice continuous gratitude and reflection, you tend to continue focusing forward and thinking of what's next after this has been achieved. But to have the awareness and ability to reflect and be in the moment and look back on how much personal development and how much personal growth your internal world, or your external world, should I say, I believe is a really good reflection of your internal world. And
that comes back to the congruence, right?
your congruence,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so if there's peace, tranquility and presence in that internal world, your external world, your relationships with money or community actually starts to thrive and prosper. So
100% knowledge of self is so important. And if we can, again, going back to the modelling, if we as counsellors can model that to our clients, then we're, again, empowering and enabling them to do the same through that compassion inquiry that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
So there's all of these things come back in and speak into themselves over and over and over again. So, yep.
What is the world that you envision and would love to leave behind when your time here is at its end? What changes would you like
That's
to
a
see?
real existential question, Patrick. I guess the world I'd like to leave behind is... when you say a world, it just sounds so big.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's more helpful to just bring it right in.
More locally.
If you can change the world for one, it's enough. And I feel that I can only do what I can do to the best of my ability. So when I leave, I want to know that I've got no regrets, that I did the best that I could do with the capacity that I had.
Yep.
So I don't want to set any lofty heights. I just grab opportunities when I see them.
Yep.
And I'm bold, and I say what I feel without, it's always a fine line. You don't want to cause offense, but I certainly stand up for injustice, and I stand up for the vulnerable, and I feel our children are vulnerable. I feel the vulnerability is actually also in them being given absolutely everything on the silver platter, and we're not equipping or empowering them to actually cope, to be anxious, to know what that looks like, to feel fear and know that they're safe.
Yeah.
We're not equipping them for these things. So I guess that's, for me, the big thing is no regrets. Every person that I've come across, I would love to know that every person that I've come across picks up some of the passion that I feel towards this, so that the journey can continue. I suppose that's it. It doesn't sound very lofty, does it? But
it doesn't need to be lofty. Usually the answers to the existential questions are very simple.
I think that's, you just want to leave the world a slightly better place than when you came into it. And if that's the way that I can do that, and know that again, through these students, you're equipping them, they're carrying on with the next generation, So you are starting a movement, I guess. I'm part of that, which is exciting.
Very exciting, and I'm so looking forward to what's in store for you next. I suppose maybe one of the last... No worries.
Yeah.
One of the last questions I wanted to ask is in terms of your own self-care and being so giving to your community, to all these children, these students, how do you take time for yourself to recharge and re-energize that passion? Because it can, I imagine, get quite tiring at times, constantly being the support. And
it's very draining. It is a draining occupation, I must say. And you've got to be really mindful not to take on the stuff that you see and what's around you. But what I will say around self-care is I think the word has been thrown around too much. It's become a buzzword. Oh, self-care. And I don't think people are putting enough intentionality into it. It is exceptionally important. It is so important. We need to look after ourselves. kids at school, if they are listening to their friends who are self-harming or with suicidal ideation or whatever it is, they are taking this stuff on and they've got nowhere to let it out. Self-care is about being able to actually find someone for you to process whatever you're taking on board. I have regular supervision myself that I go to, that I process whatever I need to in that space. I walk, coastal walk 4 mornings a week. I do my 3 Pilates. And those are all spaces for me just to be able to release. What's happening. I'm not a good journaler. This is weird because, you know, everybody says journal, journal, journal. I'm just not a good journaler. It doesn't matter. You can do, there's different ways of doing journaling. So whatever works for you, do it. Keep records, but talking through this stuff with people is so important, and safe people, obviously. So self-care also looks like taking those pause moments when you're feeling overwhelmed, recognizing again the body symptoms and going, I need to stop. I know how many clients I can see in a day. I know how much marking I can do in a day, and I limit myself. Set your boundaries and keep strong to them. Yeah. So I think those are all areas of self-care that we need to be mindful of. Yeah.
And I think it's actually a really good point that you draw on there with the whole journaling and how everyone praises how good of a release and a way to confide the emotions within you are. But what I found, like you were saying, everyone's got their own tools that they use as a means of self-care, whether it's yoga, meditation, time in nature, journaling, reading. It's all beautiful tools for detachment as well as reflection.
I think that's the key there, is reflection, because all of those are methods of reflection.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be doing, reflecting and being able to reflect, but also not going down rabbit holes, because we can be hard on ourselves. So being gentle with ourselves through that.
The unconditional
and having
love.
fun, humour and laughter is so important, even in counselling. I use it a lot with my kids, and it just brings joy. They love it. So I love it, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. You get so fixated on all of these really heavy, hard-hitting questions and experiences. But yeah, life is short. Nothing is guaranteed. So actually being able to make the most of every moment that's presented to you, have
fun, laugh.
Fun with it, yeah. That's a really good point.
Seize the moment.
Carpe diem.
Yeah. Carpe diem, exactly.
Amazing. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. That was
such
so
a pleasure.
Insightful.
I hope it didn't burn your ear off with that.
Not at all. Not at all. That was spectacular. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Such a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode. I hope that there was some pearls of wisdom in there that you could take away. However, the main seed that I was hoping to plant within the collective garden today was the importance of counsel. Being able to confide in someone or providing that opportunity for someone else is invaluable. We all carry with us our own traumas and our own emotional baggage that shapes the way that we think, feel, and act. But having someone, a life partner in counsel, as Amanda put it, to walk that journey with us is really, really important. And yeah, thank you for listening. All the best. I'll see you next time. Bye.